Ichibei Hyosube is exactly the kind of character the Zero Division needed all along. While at times a larger-than-life, in-your-face man of authority and unquestionable might, Ichibei is also a bastion of history, a keeper of secrets, and a true enigma, all rolled into one. He's power personified, and to this day I still think he's one of Bleach's most unique beings, and one of the greatest characters introduced in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, with the farthest reaching ramifications. When I say he's the kind of character the Zero Division needed, I say that because, at least for me, he embodies everything I hoped they would be. All-powerful, true leaders of the Shinigami while harbouring a very real blackness within. Something Kubo tapped into in a big way come the final arc. If there's one thing that unites the very oldest of the Shinigami, it's the darkness they all share, that only comes to light when their life or their soul society is on the line. When Ichibei was introduced late into the series, he had a difficult role to fill. People expected a lot from the Zero Division and had been hotly anticipating their arrival for years at this point. And while we would come to see that they were all-powerful historical figures in their own right, Ichibei truly represented the best of them, but also the very worst. In fact, the darkly sinister side of Ichibei is my favourite thing about him. Ichibei is part of a subset of Bleach characters I like to call the big picture characters, and many of them all act in much the same way. On the outside, they often have friendly, approachable, even goofy and carefree demeanours, but in reality, these characters all act with one goal, one focus in mind: maintaining the status quo of the world, no matter the cost. Ostensibly, they're all on the side of the heroes, but their actions are often questionable and morally grey even, and they'll stop at nothing to ensure the continuation of the way of the world as they want it to be. Big picture characters include Kisuke Urahara and Kyoraku Shunsui, to name a couple, but Ichibei might be the darkest, most ruthless of the bunch. In this sense, Ichibei has played a huge role in helping to make the Royal Palace feel as shady as it does, and in turn, make it as fascinating as it is. And Ichibei is a wholly unique character within Bleach. I mean, sure, visually he stands out with his incredible design, but I'm talking in terms of character feel. As the divine leader of the Zero Division and the envoy of the Soul King himself, Ichibei Hyosube is more than just a Shinigami. He's a liminal, primordial being, the likes of which we have never seen before. He's both a part of all things that have been, and above them as well, being so fully removed from most conflicts that it all feels so small to him. When he arrives in the Soul Society in the immediate aftermath of Yamamoto's death, with a huge, broad, seemingly totally out of place grin on his face, many of us initially mistook that for insensitivity or even foolishness, but we were all thinking far too small, too personal, too intimate. Ichibei as a being is just far greater, so far beyond that of any conflict the Gotei 13 might have on its own turf, to the point where devastating losses like this barely register to him. They're all notches on the wall of history of which he's seen so many come and go. Although Ichibei isn't in Bleach for long, he feels like an insurmountable challenge to really talk about. To do so is to delve into the history of the world itself. Ichibei may not be the Soul King, but with power over all names in the Bleach universe, he is one of the closest beings to God that we've ever seen. So it's been a little while then since one of our character analysis videos, and this time we'll be taking a look at the Lord of all things black in the universe of Bleach, the most ancient, the most powerful Shinigami of all time, Ichibei Hyosube. What do we think of his visual design, his role in the world and the story, and what more could be done with this character, and how is the anime looking to spice up his place in the 1000-Year Blood War arc? Let's take a look. And yes, before we dive into this video, there will be full spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach to come. So, who is Ichibei Hyosube? Be careful saying his name so carelessly. The monk who calls the true name holds such a godlike power over names themselves that his own name cannot be spoken by those that are unworthy, which is just about everyone. Doing so may result in your voice being completely purged, which is apparently what happened to mine, I think. And it seems to me like Ichibei has no actual control over this power, as even his close allies choose to refer to him as Osho instead of his actual name, implying that no one is worthy to speak it unless he so deems it. This is just one of the many mystifying facets that make up this really awesome character. As a primordial, extraordinary being, and the ancient leader of the Zero Division and de facto face of the Royal Palace, Ichibei is a true titan of Bleach lore. In the most reductive sense, he feels like Yamamoto 2.0, a new, authoritative Shinigami leadership figure employed in the story to fill the void left over by Yamamoto's death. After all, Ichibei first appears in chapter 516, which is a mere 5 chapters on from the Captain Commander's ultimate defeat. Ichibei's story lifespan isn't particularly long, unfortunately, as his final appearance comes round fairly quickly as of chapter 613, but he makes a huge impression all the same. Of course, he is much more than just a mere replacement for Yamamoto, narratively speaking. Obviously, in terms of the hierarchy, he absolutely is not that. And in fact, Ichibei's very character strikes at the heart of the world of Bleach in such a literal sense that he almost feels like an avatar for Kubo himself. Ichibei's power over names, and therefore over power itself, allows him to give and take power freely, and nothing in the world of Bleach can escape it. Everything has a name that can be scrubbed out, that can be rewritten, thus Ichibei controls all. His abilities, which take the form of black ink, reflects the very art form, the very medium of Bleach itself. Bleach is also a very spiritual series, obviously, full of references to Buddhism, the afterlife, the cycle of rebirth, and more, that are integral to the core of the story and the world. Ichibei, in turn, reflects these themes. As effectively master of the afterlife, Ichibei is a powerfully spiritual character. His design, that of an enormous monk, evokes religious and spiritual authority, and that is true for all aspects of his character. Ichibei's personal palace, Riden, is a historical temple shrine located atop a mountain, after having ascended a colossal stone staircase. Ichibei is synonymous as well then with the concept of enlightenment. Those that wish to learn and understand the truth must first endure great hardship before having that truth bestowed upon them. Whether that's Renji learning the true name of his bankai at Ichibei's behest, or Ichigo undergoing intense training along the Irazu Sando, Ichibei is a purveyor of great and terrible knowledge. To put it bluntly, training with this mysterious man is enough to completely change a Shinigami's life. But returning to our earlier question, who is Ichibei Hyosube? And the honest truth is that outside of the surface level details we've already been through, we don't really know. And that's both exciting and frustrating at the same time. As a being who has existed for longer than maybe even the Soul Society itself, almost certainly older than the Soul Society itself, Ichibei provides us with a fascinating glimpse into the primordial land that came before, even if we've still yet to really even see it. The enigmatic nature of Ichibei and how he came to be is what makes him special. He represents the great unknown, the end of the Bleach iceberg, so completely and utterly consumed by water that even the most dedicated of fans don't really know what's going on, no matter how we might try and piece it together. There's something wonderful about a series as old as Bleach is, that has still kept some of its secrets. On the flip side of that, I wouldn't mind some of those secrets being unearthed slowly over time, and that seems to be exactly what the anime is giving us. We've done our waiting, now it's time, hopefully, to feast. It's because Ichibei is such an unknown quantity, though, that he works as well as he does. What's the enormous toothy grin hiding? What darkness is Ichibei concealing behind his unnaturally round, glassy eyes? There's definitely something tantalising about knowing that this character has seen all there is to see. As far as things I want to know go, Ichibei has lived them all. Were it possible, he could give me all the answers about Bleach that I'm desperate for. Now, whether you think Ichibei is some kind of a proxy or an avatar for the author himself is entirely up to you. And of course, it's not unusual for the author to implant themselves in their own fictional world in that way. What's intriguing to me, and this is of course again my own speculation entirely, is that Ichibei arrives so late into the world of Bleach. But he does have all of the answers to the questions that certainly I would like to ask, and that's really kind of fascinating to me. To be honest then, if I could request one thing from the anime at this point, it would be an episode or two completely detailing everything about the creation of the Bleach universe. Where did Ichibei come from? How did he begin? Is he really a Shinigami at all, or is he more than that? What was his relationship, if anything, with the man who would become Ryo? Both the source material and the anime's brand new content have no reservations, painting Ichibei as an extremely sinister, seemingly maybe even underhanded being, and I want to see more of that. Interestingly, I think parallels can easily be made between both Ichibei and none other than Yhwach himself. Although Ichibei is considerably more ancient than Yhwach, they both share the same selfish mindset that everything in the world is theirs for the taking, it belongs to them somehow. Ichibei believes that all black in the world belongs to him, and even goes so far as to steal the black from Knights of the Soul Society many years into the future. Interestingly, both of these characters can give and take power freely as well, they just do so in different ways. Certainly, in that sense, it does feel like Ichibei is supposed to be the Shinigami version of Yhwach. Callous, cold-hearted leaders of their respective sides, each fighting for the Soul King, Ichibei to keep the status quo, Yhwach to shatter it. And so of all the characters in Bleach, I really do find myself between a rock and a hard place when it comes to Ichibei. I appreciate the mystery that surrounds him, it makes him compelling, and in some ways it arguably completes him. But at the same time, I think I am ready to know more at last, and I probably have been for many years now. When it comes to Ichibei's visual design, well, I generally think it's pretty incredible actually. Even over 500 chapters deep into the story, Kubo managed to spring 5 completely unique looking captains on us in the Zero Division, and Ichibei's is my second favourite design of the lot, the first of course being Senjumaru. But there's so much to like about the way Ichibei looks. His face is unlike any other in Bleach. When his huge, broad mouth curls up in glee, or his bulbous eyes shimmer inquisitively, it is immensely expressive, cartoonish even, to the point where he really does resemble nobody else, and I think that is a true feat. I love how well defined his features actually are. Every aspect of his face feels his own, carved from stone and brought to life with this weird, joviality. And Kubo makes excellent use of Ichibei's face during his battle with Yhwach. He uses Ichibei's face to convey notes about his character, about his personality. And I love how it contorts and twists to transform Ichibei from a sort of jolly but mostly harmless man into a genuine visual monster who delights in brutality and bloodlust. There's a real tangible weight to Ichibei, I think. There's a real presence to this character. You simply have to look at how he carries himself. He has the immense confidence you'd expect of a nearly divine figure, and he does have amazing screen presence whenever he's around. He totally dominates the panels. And when both he and Yhwach are engaged together, it's a true clash of behemoths for more reasons than one. Each of these characters trying their best to hog the limelight. They are both that good on the page. So we've talked a lot about Ichibei's face, and I think that is where all the action is in regards to his design, but that's okay. I love how simple the rest of his look actually is. Ichibei is old. I mean really old, so it makes sense that material attachments and accoutrements don't really mean that much to him anymore. Where many younger captains, even those found in the Zero Division, feel the need to customize their look somewhat, Ichibei simply wears a huge, low-slung set of burnished red prayer beads around his neck, which hang beneath his black, bushy beard. The prayer beads are an awesome touch, adding a strange sense of regal spirituality to Ichibei, though it's not the first time we've seen a Shinigami adorn themselves with beads like this. Just look at Jirobo Ikanzaka. One thing that is odd about Ichibei, and many other characters too for that matter, like Oetsu for instance, is that he just doesn't really look that old. And certainly he is on the older side of things, but Ichibei doesn't look as old as Yamamoto did, despite being presumably considerably more ancient. The prevailing theory, and one that I subscribe to as well because it just makes the most sense, is that once the Soul King has infused a member of the Zero Division's bones with the Oken, and therefore the power of the Royal Palace itself is coursing through their veins, they stopped aging. It really is the only explanation that makes any kind of sense, so I'm running with it for now. But then again, Unohana looks basically the exact same she did 1,000 years ago, whereas Yamamoto, the stress of running the Gotei 13, clearly got to him quite badly. So we've touched on it briefly already, but Ichibei's Zanpakuto Ichimonji feels like an extension of the character's themes. This idea that Ichibei is the author of Bleach's world. Not only does he decide the names of just about everything in Bleach, from Shikai to Bankai, and even the Seirei itself, but he has the power to just rewrite whatever he likes. The world of Bleach is an open book to Ichibei, and that's kind of terrifying. And again, why Ichibei kind of works as a sort of meta-insertion for Kubo himself. Now, while Ichibei doesn't seemingly have the desire to meddle, at least not openly, he certainly could if he wanted to. At the start of the video, I mentioned that Ichibei was the kind of character the Zero Division needed, and that's true for a number of reasons, and Ichimonji was a big part of that. Initially in the source material, Kubo didn't really get the chance to show off what any of the Zero Division could actually do, save for Ichibei. And considering how tight space was in those chapters, that was probably a good, smart move in the end. Because while the Zero Division have long been seen as an overrated joke, until relatively recently that is, Ichibei never experienced that same slander, and it's thanks to his great showing against Yhwach, a demonstration of the unbelievably broken power of his Zanpakuto, a power that's absolutely fit for the leader of all Shinigami. In its sealed state, much like the other members of the Zero Division, Ichibei's Zanpakuto doesn't take the form of a katana. Instead, he wields an enormous calligraphy brush. What's interesting about Ichibei's Zanpakuto right off the bat, however, is that it has a passive effect even while in its sealed state, which, at least as far as I can remember, virtually no other Zanpakuto has. While sealed, Ichimonji doesn't cut flesh, but names. So, as we see against Yhwach, simply touching the sealed brush with his arm to deflect it resulted in the physical strength of Yhwach's limb being carved in two as its name was split in half. Upon its Shikai released with the command "paint it black," Ichimonji doesn't change much. The brush head is replaced with a thick, flat blade instead, but interestingly the blade may appear difficult to distinguish from a brush by Ichibei's opponent. The sensation is the exact same between the two of them. In Shikai, Ichimonji now splashes black ink all over the place with every swing and with every clash. Everything coated in Ichimonji's darkness loses its name entirely. It does make me laugh a little bit that Kubo demonstrated this ability against a character who was literally using unnamed artifacts. You know, we never knew the name of Yhwach's sword beforehand, and we certainly won't know it now, but apparently it did have one before being hit by the ink. But I mean, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to realise how casually godlike this power is, and just how strong it would be, particularly against fellow Shinigami. It's funny too to kind of think about how devastating this ability is, relatively speaking, to the world around him. You know, think back to the Deicide arc. Aizen mentions that with a swing of his sword he's able to transform the landscape, even though it was actually Ichigo. But well, with a swing of Ichibei's sword, he's able to remove someone's powers entirely. Let's take, I don't know, Hitsugaya for example. Say Hitsugaya came up against Ichibei. If Ichibei uses Ichimonji, his Shikai, and manages to splash Hyorinmaru with black ink, then Hyorinmaru would presumably lose its name, and presumably absolutely everything else that comes with it, turning Hyorinmaru into a worthless, empty blade, at least until Ichibei saw fit to remove the ink, and presumably restore its power? I have no idea. That's why this character is so crazy to think about. Also, again, continuing on with this imaginary scenario, Hitsugaya's Zanpakuto has now been covered in black ink. If Ichibei then uses bankai, which we'll get to a little bit later, and rewrites Hyorinmaru's name to be anything else, can Ichibei create a new Zanpakuto? I have no idea how that would even work. Or he just changes the properties of Hyorinmaru to be slightly different, but it gives him total control over literally everything with a name. And in the world of Bleach, names hold the most power. And then, speaking of his bankai, or his Shinuchi, or evolved Zanpakuto, as he calls it, because he's that ancient, that's what they were known as before he bestowed them the name bankai, although who bestowed the name Shinuchi? Was that Ichibei as well, maybe? I'm not entirely sure. But his bankai, Shirafude Ichimonji, turns the blade back into a brush, now ebbing and flowing constantly with a stream of almost angelic pure white ink. And with this bankai, Ichibei can now bestow a brand new name onto something that's had its original name blotted out by the black ink. And Ichibei reveals that the target of his bankai will have their properties altered to match that which they have now been named after. The only example we ever see is Yhwach's name becoming Black Ant, to which Ichibei tells him he's now become as fragile and fleeting as. Honestly, I've said it before, but the simplest Zanpakuto are often the most powerful. Of course, there are some exceptions, Katen Kyokotsu for example, but generally speaking, the simpler the core ability, the more powerful it can be, and that's absolutely the case here. Ichimonji is a more than fitting ability for the leader of the Zero Division, giving him the strength to completely rewrite entire aspects of the Bleach universe, even change a character's very existence. Despite his position in the hierarchy of Bleach, as I mentioned earlier, we learned absolutely nothing about Ichibei's personal history during the tenure of the story, which was disappointing. There were small hints at something dropped along the way, an implication that he and Yhwach knew each other somehow from many years ago, but that was about it. Now, thankfully, the anime looks to be filling in some of the massive, more egregious gaps in the character's timeline. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I have no problem with Ichibei having secrets, but I do think a character of this magnitude, as far as the lore goes, needs some kind of an explanation attributed to him. I won't go into a huge amount of detail regarding the anime's current handling of Ichibei's history, as these character analysis videos generally are supposed to focus on the source material, plus, more importantly, I've already made numerous videos looking at the small new snippets we've been given, but suffice it to say, the Thousand Year Blood War arc anime looks to be expanding on the backstory of the Soul King, and by extension, Ichibei as well. What dark role Ichibei had in the Soul King's ultimate fate, we can't yet be sure, but there is nothing wholesome about the way Ichibei's shadowy form is cradling the now mutilated king. And later, as Ichibei sits down for a negotiation with Yhwach himself, we see firsthand that stone-cold, unbreakable grin on his face. Even as he talks of the Soul King, he hand-waves away accusations of suffering from Ryo's son with a massive smirk. It kind of seems to me like Ichibei now has the world he wants, and he'll do whatever is necessary to keep it. While this is total speculation on my part, as a lot of it is, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we found out that Ichibei was somehow integral to the fall of the Soul King. Maybe he conspired behind Ryo's back with the ancestors of the noble houses, or maybe he acted on a whim to try and conceal his intentions from the Almighty. Or perhaps he did nothing of the sort, and has been fiercely loyal to Ryo for over a millennia. Hopefully we'll find out more in the future. And so we reach Ichibei's role in Bleach. Unsurprisingly, considering his character lifespan in the source material, it isn't too extensive. That's not to say Ichibei doesn't play an important role, he does, but I think a lot of that importance goes understated, and a lot of it is lost to time, at least until we see more of his backstory and some of the bigger decisions he made on behalf of the world itself. Of the Zero Division members, save for maybe Oetsu though, Ichibei definitely has the biggest impact, but it still needs to be fleshed out more in the anime to come to be truly satisfying and worthy of a character like this. So Ichibei first appears in Bleach at the tail end of the first Quincy invasion, just after the Gotei 13 has been completely decimated at the hands of the Vandenreich. With Yamamoto dead, the Zero Division makes their presence known at last. At long last, for those of us who are reading weekly for, I don't know, over a decade prior to this point, or something insane like that. And at the start of chapter 516, we see Ichibei gathering the other Zero Division members in the Royal Palace above, before they all arrive just outside the Seirete in the Tenchuren. As the other Zero Division members get reacquainted with the current Gotei 13 captains, Ichibei speaks with Kyoraku about their mission. He notes that they have been tasked with rebuilding the Gotei 13 and the Seirete on the Soul King's orders, and will be taking Ichigo along with several other Shinigami back to the palace with them. Interestingly, we get what looks like a small shot of Ichibei seemingly discussing the reconstruction of the Seirete with Tenjiro, but nothing ever seems to come of this plan to literally rebuild the place. In fact, we never see them interact with the Gotei again after this. The more pressing matter to Ichibei seems to be Ichigo, and he explains to the boy that while his broken Tensor Zangetsu can never be fixed, it can be reforged in the Royal Palace thanks to the special, incredible rituals they have there, and Ichigo agrees to go with them. Arriving at Kukaku Shiba's house, Ichibei reveals the Tenchuren has no way to return to the palace on its own, and they blast off into the sky. And then upon arriving back in the royal palace, like I said, Ichibei is not down below for very long. Ichibei details the true nature of the Oken to Ichigo, before Ichigo is then taken to the first of the palaces on his trip. Now again, I do need to touch briefly upon the anime here, as it adds a substantial new scene to Ichibei's story. After having his Zanpakuto reforged by Uetsu, Ichigo is taken to Ichibei's palace, where the monk sets him upon the mystical passage of Irazu Sando. Here, Ichibei plans to reveal some of the truth of the Soul King's existence to Ichigo, watching him bear the weight of the one who currently wears all three worlds on his shoulders. You see, Ichibei is determined to take Ichigo beyond the veil of a simple Shinigami, claiming he'll never truly be more than that if all he does is continue to hone his Zanpakuto. I mentioned this in my episode review at the time, but what seems so special about Ichibei's training is that it trains the soul predominantly, the very core of a being in Bleach. Later, when Renji and Rukia arrive at Ichibei's palace, the two of them spend time getting used to the incredibly dense reishi in the air, before Ichibei arrives and agrees to allow them into the inner sanctum where they can continue their training. While there, Ichibei talks with Renji about his Zanpakuto, revealing that it hasn't been entirely honest with him all these years. Ichibei reveals to him the true name of Zabimaru's bankai before helping Renji complete his training to earn his Zanpakuto's complete respect. After Ichigo's training is finished, Ichibei arrives on the walkway to let him know that the Quincy invasion of Seirete began about 3 hours ago. As Ichigo leaves, heading down the enormous staircase at a breakneck speed, Ichibei remarks that the boy has indeed grown stronger. In fact, not only has he become a true Shinigami at last, he's surpassed being just a Shinigami entirely. Although this is only a brief one, this is another cool example of Ichibei's complete, nonchalant approach to the struggles of a human, the struggles that a human might face and might feel due to their emotions. Ichigo is understandably upset that Ichibei kept from him that the Quincy invasion has long since begun. Ichibei, however, doesn't seem to care or even really understand why Ichigo would be so bothered about that. The fact that his friends and, frankly, family are now in danger down below, and he could have been there helping them for hours by this point, Ichibei just simply isn't bothered by that, and is as always solely focused on achieving the goals that he has set out. But as the battle progresses, Yhwach, Hashwolf, and Uryu invade the royal palace over the course of the next day, alerting Ichibei and the others to their presence. Ichibei, of course, plays a central role in the scheme to defend the royal palace from the Quincies. Using his Zanpakuto, Ichibei paints a concealment sign in front of the real palace, hiding it from sight until the time is right. While the other members of the Zero Division battle Yhwach's Schutzstaffel on the false walkway, Yhwach himself challenges Ichibei before the path to the real palace. Also, that's another small point that I didn't bring up during the Ichimonji discussion, but it seems to be that Ichibei, with his Zanpakuto in its sealed state, can create seals that will just do what he's written upon them. We see this twice. The conceal seal totally hides the royal palace from sight. It is completely imperceptible, and it seems like all Ichibei has done to achieve that is just draw this massive emblem in front of it. And again, he does this when he creates, and well, it just says seal, it's like a literal blockade. But he does the same thing again, but neither he nor Yhwach seem to be able to progress past this seal, and he's created it simply by writing that word, which is completely insane. I mean, what else can he do with this Zanpakuto? Or is it one of these ones where he can effectively do anything at all? Which again, for the leader of the Zero Division, would be perfectly fitting. It is actually kind of fun to try and think up some of these abilities on the fly. For example, if he was to paint on the floor a huge seal or emblem that said bounce or something like that, then jumped on it, would it send him flying into the sky? And again, maybe the opposite is true as well. If he painted a seal on the floor that just said hole or crater or pit, would someone be able to fall into it and it just be this everlasting drop? It's kind of terrifying to think about, but I also love Zanpakuto like this, where they are so simple but just can expand out almost limitlessly. Anyway, Ichibei battles Yhwach in one of Bleach's best, most climactic battles to date, and I really do want to do a Bleach battle analysis on this one, perhaps as we get closer to Core 3 coming out, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but the two of them clash with the full force of their powers. However, Ichibei proves to be too much for the Quincy King and ends the fight by sending a powerless Yhwach spiralling down to Earth. Except as Ichibei turns back towards the palace, Yhwach returns, having finally unleashed his own power, the Almighty. Although Ichibei then tries one last-ditch effort to remove Yhwach from the cycle of life and death, using his ultimate ability Futen Taisatsuryo, Yhwach kills him, obliterating the leader of the Zero Division and sending chunks of his body splattering across the floor in a gruesome fashion. Easily one of, if not the single most gruesome death in Bleach ever, perhaps? Seriously, like, when you see afterwards Ichibei's body is just strewn all across the floor, and Kubo draws it, it's just there. You know, like, there's no attempt to hide it, no censorship really or anything like that, which I think is awesome. It really gets across how just brutal Yhwach was to Ichibei, but it might be the most gruesome death in the series, maybe? I'm not entirely sure. However, that's surprisingly not the end of the monk, as while Yhwach continues on to the palace now unabated, Ichigo and the others arrive and find Ichibei's shattered corpse. However, some of Ichibei's essence lingers on. As they approach him, Ichigo hears Ichibei's voice resonate in his head, asking him to say his name. When Ichigo declares Ichibei's full name, the Zero Division leader is able to take a portion of Ichigo's own power to help restore his life and body once more. Presumably, Ichibei is just completely immortal. I believe all members of the Zero Division are immortal as long as the Royal Palace is still standing at the time of their deaths, but I mean, unless Yhwach was to completely reduce Ichibei's body parts to dust, you don't get much more dead than that, so the fact that some of Ichibei's spirit or something was able to hang on for Ichigo's arrival kind of tells me that it doesn't really matter how dead he is. He's able to bring himself back to life through the power of his name. Again, another crazy thing this innate power of his apparently can do. However, despite having risen again, Ichibei is no longer strong enough now to face Yhwach, and time is running out, so he begs Ichigo to do whatever he can just to try and slow him down, just to try and stop him. Yet, as Ichigo and the others dash now to the Soul King's throne room in desperation, a hunched-over Ichibei ominously notes that there is no way they will be able to defeat Yhwach, before musing that that's what peace is all about anyway, asking Yhwach if that's true or not. Easily one of the creepiest looks Ichibei has ever given in the series, obviously very, very sinister, very, very ominous, and after this, Ichibei is never seen again. And so obviously that's a real shame that Ichibei is just nowhere to be found throughout the rest of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. Obviously he shows up in Can't Fear Your Own World, so I'd love to see that animated personally, because then it really will feel like a proper sequel to the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, but Ichibei not appearing again always sat weirdly with me. I think I and many other people actually anticipated that the Zero Division would return, but as villains. As Yhwach became the Soul King, they would find themselves duty-bound to serve him no matter what, but that never happened. It turned out they were all actually dead, except for Ichibei, who's just chilling on the walkway. No idea what happens to him after the palace is transformed into Varvelt. He's just completely gone, apparently. But, so I would love to see more of him in the anime. I think there is much more they can do here. Try and include him in some way. That makes perfect sense to me. I would love to see him come back, do a little bit more. They've already expanded on his role very nicely as is, but there is still plenty of room in the future as well, especially since Core 3 is basically going to open with his defeat pretty much, unless they, change things around a little bit. But that's it for the character of Ichibei Hyosube. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Again, I apologise for not uploading for about a week or so, but I have been actually really quite sick, which is really annoying. I'm slowly starting to get over it now. If you've noticed more cuts than normal in this video, it's probably because I was having a coughing fit at some point and didn't want to subject you to it. But again, I really do appreciate the support, and I really do appreciate the patience as well. But yeah, again, I really hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about Ichibei's character. Do you enjoy Ichibei's character? What do you think he brought to the story and world of Bleach? And what would you like to see from him in the anime still to come? What more would you like to see from this character? What do you think of his battle with Yhwach? Do you think it's one of the best the 1000-Year Blood War arc had to offer? And do you think there is any way this character can be included, since he survives when the Varvel arc rolls around? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Alright, but before we go, I want to give an enormous shout out to all of my Patreon supporters. Thank you all so very much as always. Your support means the world to me, and it really does help keep the channel running and keep the content coming. If you really like what I do here in my small space on YouTube and want to take that support from me another step further, you can support me over on Patreon to get your name in the credits and get videos like this one completely ad-free. Thanks again, everyone. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.